A mysterious guy riding his Harley on vacant streets while wearing a long flowing duster and a leather bag slung across his back. Before we start the recap, we are giving away $100 every week for the first one who will answer the question in the end of the video. Make sure to stick to the end, and let's dive in. This almost deserted town does not produce a single sound, so all that one can hear is his Harley soaring on his way to Celestial Falls. As he passes by the vehicle of the Department of Meter Readers collecting the decapitated heads, the head collector tells him to return back as they are in the red zone. When the man tells the collector about his destination, he says that they have just come from Celestial Falls and that there is no hoarding. Humanity's last hope, whose job is to preserve humanity, and one of humanity's last chances is Dalton, who is a meter reader. Nevertheless, the disease did not spare Dalton's family. His youngest daughter Madeline was the first to exhibit signs in the family, so to stop her from spreading other family members, meter readers possess a magical green crystal called a meter, which derives its power from the meter reader itself. As the meter's power depends on the immunity of the meter reader, their immunity needs to be re-evaluated every 72 hours. Meter readers with low immunity can also be infected with the plague and turn into monsters. Dalton believes the meter readers are just regular Joes, not Psy. Now it's time to speak about business, the true purpose for his visit, and he inquires about the symptoms shown by her daughter Mercy. Mrs. Jones informs him that her daughter has not been herself lately. She speaks in a language she has never learned and spits at her. Mrs. Jones wonders if he can assist her daughter. When Dalton asks where Mercy is, Mrs. Jones points to the room at the end of the passage where Mercy has been tied up in bed. When he introduces himself, Mercy tells him to help her and says she's feeling afraid taking the meter out of his bag. Dalton swings it around her body, but the meter does not ignite to show the presence of bad force from her. He then pulls out the unique mirror that can tell what is hurting her, but the glass immediately reflects the image of the wicked mother. Mrs. Jones, everything in the room starts shaking and falling down when Dalton commands the demon in the name of God. It spits thick mucus on Dalton and then bites off a piece of meat from Mercy's leg. Dalton attacks her with a scythe and casts a spell for the demon to leave for the mortal body, and with the low whimpering sound from Mrs. Jones, the scuffle with him comes to an end. Dalton's wife bakes fresh bread and asks her children to set the table, not knowing whether Dalton would return for supper. Teresa can't believe her father would return home safely, but her mother doesn't want her to spout gibberish in front of her younger brother when their mother sends Michael upstairs. Teresa rationally explains that their daddy might not come home at all, and her mother reminds her of her father's immunity. But there is less than an hour left to mark 72 hours since Dalton has been out of the house at this point, and Teresa says that if her father is infected, she will do whatever it takes to keep the family safe from his infection. Concerned about the circumstances, Teresa continues to monitor the situation outside the house via CCTV. Almost an hour later, the sensor camera detects the presence of someone outside when Dalton knocks on the door. Michael and their mother are overjoyed and rush to open the door, but Teresa stops them and refuses to let Dalton in. Shortly after, she returns with a weapon in her hand and threatens to chop off her father's head if anyone lets him in. Michael despises his sister's behavior, but Teresa is simply following her father's advice. After sending Michael to his room, Dalton's wife asks him to spend the night in the cellar, and the first thing they will do tomorrow is bring the doctor to test him, and Dalton goes to the cellar with retreating footsteps. Teresa attempts to remain awake all night but falls asleep when she sees the cellar door open and goes to the kitchen holding a weapon in her hand and finds her father by the refrigerator with his mouth full of blood and her mother and brother dead by the fridge. Dalton has transformed into a man-eating monster who feeds on her mother and brother before creepily reminding Teresa not to trust anyone, and with screaming she wakes up. It was just a nightmare. After she wakes up, she goes to the kitchen and finds her mother preparing food for her father in the dark kitchen. While the mother and daughter argue, Teresa has no choice but to hunt them down. She goes inside the house to retrieve her weapon, but the mother knocks her down in order to prevent her from committing sins. Teresa wakes up with a heavy head, but she rushes out with a weapon and sees the cellar door open. After praying to God, she descends the stairs to the cellar. Teresa calls her mother, father, and brother's names, but no one responds. In the eerily dark basement, she sees Michael with his monster face mask. She asks him where their parents are, and he points in this dark room. Teresa ignores her brother's lengthy arrowhead story and instead follows Michael's directions to locate her father. Dalton has not been infected, but 3 days of delay has surely cost him a lot. As he is nearing the end of his life, he informs Teresa that his wife and Michael have been infected and expresses his regrets about not being able to save them before he dies. He wants to hand over his meter to his daughter, but Teresa cannot extend her hands to accept it. Just then Michael crawls on the ceiling while her monster mother is now levitating in the air. Teresa is compelled to take them down before it is too late, as she is going to be attacked from both sides by her mother and Michael. In the nick of time, she swiftly jumps to the side, forcing them to collide with each other. Pierce Michael eventually kills him before his mother recovers from the trauma. Rains. Teresa now takes the meter from Dalton's hand just like he wished she would. The next day the head collector takes the decapitated heads of her mother and brother from the bin, then they ignite the heads right there in the vehicle. Teresa looks out the window to make sure the heads are taken care of. Who did the cat in The Godfather belong to? Comment below your right answer. For more chances, we're uploading movie recaps with quizzes every day. Subscribe and turn on notifications to collect more prizes. The winner will be announced every week. Good luck.